I'm sitting across from my boss, heart pounding like a drum. My hands are sweating as I hold the letter I spent weeks preparing. The conference room feels smaller than usual, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees. I just asked for a $20,000 raise. His face shows pure disappointment, like I just insulted his mother. "This is sudden," he says, shaking his head. "Your expectations are unrealistic." But here's the thing. I write the budget. I know exactly how much money this company makes. I know what everyone earns. I know he's lying through his teeth. The numbers don't lie, even if he does. He leans back in his chair, acting like I just asked him to buy me a mansion. "We simply can't afford this right now." Can't afford it? Last month, I watched him approve a $15,000 bonus for himself. Just because he felt like it. The hypocrisy burns in my chest like acid. I force a smile and nod. "I understand," I say quietly. But inside, something snaps. A fire starts burning that won't go out. As I walk back to my desk, one thought echoes in my mind. He's going to regret this decision. He has no idea what he just started. Let me tell you how I got here. 6 months before this moment, my previous boss laid me off. Not because I was bad at my job, because she wanted to hire her friends instead. The whole thing was orchestrated weeks in advance, I later discovered. I remember sitting in that sterile conference room, watching her stumble through an obviously rehearsed speech. "We're restructuring," she said, avoiding eye contact. What she meant was, "I want my college roommate to have your position." The funny part? She was later investigated for embezzlement. Turns out she was stealing money while firing honest employees. Karma has a sense of humor sometimes. The investigation revealed she'd been siphoning funds for months, using fake vendor accounts. My husband makes good money, so we weren't desperate. But losing that job still hurt. It felt like being punched in the stomach by someone you trusted. The betrayal stung more than the unemployment. After that experience, I made myself a promise. Next time, I would choose stability over pride. I would find a safe place to work and keep my head down. I would avoid drama and focus on building my career slowly. Looking back now, I realize how naive that promise was. You can't avoid drama when drama finds you. That's how I ended up taking a controller position at this small property management firm. The pay was lower than my previous job, but I had a plan. Having controller on my resume would open doors later. I researched the company thoroughly before interviewing, checking their reputation and financial stability. The office was tiny, just 12 employees managing rental properties around the city. Nothing fancy, but it seemed stable. The boss, Michael, seemed decent during the interview. He talked about treating employees like family and building something together. "We're growing fast," he said with genuine excitement. "We need someone to help us get organized financially." The work itself was straightforward. Track rent payments, manage vendor bills, prepare monthly reports, basic accounting stuff, but they desperately needed systems. Everything was scattered across different spreadsheets and filing cabinets. I thought this would be perfect. A quiet place to rebuild my confidence and gain experience. No office politics, no backstabbing friends getting hired over qualified people. Just clean, honest work in a professional environment. Michael shook my hand on my first day with a warm smile. "Welcome to the family," he said. I should have known better. Families can be the most toxic places of all. I threw myself into the work like my life depended on it. 50-hour weeks became normal. I built systems from scratch, automated reporting, streamlined processes, created standard operating procedures for everything. Every night, I stayed late perfecting formulas and organizing files. The company's finances were a mess when I started. No budgets, no forecasting, bills paid randomly. I fixed all of it. Created monthly budget reports, set up proper vendor management, established cash flow projections. Within 6 months, I had transformed their entire financial operation. We went from chaos to smooth efficiency. Michael loved bragging about our improved financial controls in meetings with investors. "You're irreplaceable," he told me one day, watching me present the quarterly report. "I don't know how we survived without you." The business started thriving. We signed new property management contracts, expanded into commercial buildings, hired more staff. Revenue grew 30% in my first year. I felt proud of what we were building together, but then something changed. At the company holiday party, I overheard Michael talking to another business owner. He was laughing, drink in hand, completely unaware I was nearby. "She doesn't really need the money," he said casually. "Her husband's loaded." My stomach dropped. That comment would haunt me for months. Everything shifted when my husband and I found out we were expecting our first child. Suddenly, the future looked different. I needed to think about daycare costs, health insurance, college savings. My comfortable salary wasn't going to cut it anymore. The reality of supporting a family hit me hard. I spent nights researching controller salaries in our city. The data was clear. I was being underpaid by at least $20,000. Not slightly underpaid, dramatically underpaid. Other companies were paying 40 to 50% more for similar roles. I gathered evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial. Salary surveys from 3 different recruiting firms. Job postings for comparable positions. Even called a few recruiters to confirm the market rates. The numbers were undeniable. I wasn't asking for charity or special treatment. I was asking for fair market value. Actually, I was asking for less than fair market value, just enough to feel respected. My annual review was coming up. Perfect timing to present my case professionally. I drafted a detailed letter outlining my contributions, the market data, and a reasonable request. $20,000. That would put me at the 10th percentile for controllers in our market. Not the top, not even average. Just barely fair. I felt confident and nervous at the same time. I handed him the letter a week before my scheduled annual review. It was 3 pages of pure professionalism. Documented achievements, market research, specific examples of money I'd saved the company. I had rehearsed this moment in my head dozens of times, preparing for every possible response. "I've prepared some information for our upcoming review," I said, placing it on his desk. "I'd appreciate if you could look it over beforehand." He glanced at the first page and his expression changed immediately. Not surprise or consideration. Disappointment. Like I had personally betrayed him by asking for fair compensation. "I'll review this," he said coldly, setting it aside without reading further. That was Tuesday. By Friday, I could feel the tension whenever we were in the same room. He avoided eye contact, gave short answers to my questions, acted like I had committed some terrible offense. During our review meeting, he barely mentioned my performance. No praise for the systems I'd built, the money I'd saved, the chaos I'd organized. Instead, he focused on minor criticisms and vague suggestions for improvement. The raise request sat on his desk like evidence of a crime. He kept glancing at it with that same disappointed expression. Finally, he spoke the words that would change everything. "I'm disappointed in your approach," he said, tapping the letter with his finger. "This feels sudden and unrealistic given our current budget constraints." Current budget constraints? I wrote the budget. I knew exactly how much money we had. I knew about his bonuses, his expense account dinners, his wife's consulting fees. But I stayed calm, keeping my voice professional despite the rage building inside. "I understand budget constraints," I replied evenly. "That's why I researched market rates and requested a reasonable adjustment." He shook his head like I was missing some obvious point. "We're a small company. We can't compete with corporate salaries." Then came his counteroffer. $3,000. Not $20,000. $3,000. It was insulting, barely enough to cover the increased health insurance costs for the baby. The amount was so pathetic it felt like a slap in the face. "This is all I can offer right now," he said, "and I need you to keep the accounting department under strict budget constraints moving forward." I nodded and smiled. "Of course," I said. "I'll stick to the budget." He had no idea what I meant by that, but he would learn soon enough. If he wanted me to stick to the budget, then I would stick to the budget. Exactly. Every single line item would be scrutinized with surgical precision. 2 weeks later, our accounts payable clerk quit. Rebecca had been there for 3 years, handling vendor payments and invoice processing. She came to my office on her last day, looking exhausted and frustrated. "I can't take it anymore," she said quietly. "He treats us like we're disposable, like we should be grateful just to have jobs." I covered her responsibilities while we searched for a replacement. More work, same insulting pay. But I didn't complain. I just documented everything. The extra hours, the additional duties, the impact on my other projects. Every task was recorded with timestamps and detailed descriptions. That's when Michael brought in his wife, Amanda, to help temporarily with the accounts payable work. She was smart and polished, with an MBA from a good school. I trained her on our systems and processes with professional courtesy. Then I saw her first paycheck. She was making 25% more than me, for part-time hours, for work that I was managing and overseeing, for a temporary position helping with basic data entry. The math was so absurd it made my head spin. I stared at that payroll report for a long time. My hands shook as I printed it out and filed it away. The woman who was married to my boss doing entry-level work for 20 hours a week was earning more than the controller who had built the entire financial system. That night, I barely slept. We hired a new accounts payable person, Tracy, a recent graduate who seemed eager to learn. Amanda stayed on payroll as a consultant even though she stopped coming to the office regularly. The transition was seamless for everyone except my sense of justice. I processed her consulting payments every month, 125% of my salary, for work she wasn't even doing anymore. The invoices were vague: business development consulting and strategic planning services. No deliverables, no reports, no measurable outcomes. I started comparing payroll logs with actual office attendance. Amanda billed for days when the wife's security system showed she never entered the building. She charged for full days when she was posting vacation photos on social media. The best part? She was using a loophole I had created in our contractor payment system. I had designed it to handle legitimate consulting fees efficiently. Now it was being used to funnel money to the boss's wife. Every month I processed those payments and felt a little piece of my soul die. I was enabling my own exploitation. I was the one writing the checks that proved how little my boss valued my work. I started a new folder on my computer. Documentation. I began saving everything: emails, payroll reports, budget allocations, expense reports. No agenda yet. Just preparation for something I couldn't yet name. The documentation folder grew larger every week. Screenshots of payroll discrepancies, emails where Michael contradicted himself about budget constraints, expense reports showing his personal purchases charged to the company. Each file was meticulously organized and dated. I wasn't planning anything specific. I just knew that knowledge was power, and I was feeling powerless. Every piece of evidence was a small act of rebellion against the unfairness. The folder became my secret weapon against his gaslighting. I also started quietly deleting my standard operating procedures. Not all at once, that would be obvious. Just 1 or 2 files per week. The detailed instructions I had written for month-end closing. The step-by-step guides for financial reporting. The contact lists for vendors and banks. If they thought I was replaceable, they could figure out how to replace my work. If my knowledge had no value, then they wouldn't miss it when it was gone. I created a new password-protected file called Contingency Plan. Inside, I kept track of every system, every process, every piece of institutional knowledge that lived only in my head. The anger was turning into something colder, more calculating. I stopped feeling emotional about the unfairness and started feeling strategic about the solution. It was around this time that I got an interesting phone call. A recruiting firm called about a controller position at a manufacturing company across town. Remote work options, full benefits, and a salary that was 30% higher than what I was currently making. The timing felt like divine intervention. "We heard great things about your work," the recruiter said. "Would you be interested in discussing this opportunity?" I had never felt more interested in anything in my life. The interview process was smooth and professional. They appreciated my experience with systems development and process improvement. They didn't act like I was asking for charity when I mentioned my salary expectations. The respect was intoxicating after months of being undervalued. Within 2 weeks, I had a formal offer letter, everything I had asked Michael for, and more. Respect, fair compensation, and a manager who seemed to value expertise over personal connections. I opened my computer and accessed the budget spreadsheet. Under the accounting department section, I found my salary line item. I highlighted it and typed a note in the margin. Highest paid position in department. Then I opened a new document and began writing my resignation letter. If Michael wanted me to stick to the accounting budget, then I would remove the highest paid person from it. Me. The irony was delicious. I printed the resignation letter on Monday morning and walked straight to Michael's office. He was drinking coffee and checking emails, looking comfortable and confident. The morning sunlight streamed through his window, illuminating his expensive desk accessories. Soon, his comfort would evaporate. "I have something for you," I said, placing the letter on his desk. He read the first line and his face went pale. 2 weeks' notice? You told me to stick to the accounting budget, I said calmly. So I am. I'm removing the highest paid person from the department. Me. He stared at the letter like it was written in a foreign language. This is very sudden. Is it? I asked. I've been here 2 years. I asked for fair compensation. You said it wasn't in the budget. Now it will be. He shuffled through the papers on his desk, looking for words that wouldn't come. We can discuss this. Maybe there's some flexibility. There isn't, I said firmly. My last day will be Friday, the 28th. I walked out of his office and back to my desk. He didn't follow me. He didn't ask what it would take to make me stay. He just sat there, probably trying to figure out who was going to clean up the mess I was about to leave behind. The panic in his eyes was worth everything. My final 2 weeks were interesting. I finished only the work that was visible to Michael and the other managers. Monthly reports that had to be submitted, vendor payments that couldn't wait, basic maintenance of the systems, anything that would immediately expose the chaos I was creating. Everything else, I left it undone. Month-end closing procedures, incomplete. Financial statement preparation, skipped. Payroll processing set up for the following month, someone else's problem now. Knowledge transfer documentation, deleted weeks ago. Bank reconciliation templates, password protected and filed away. Michael avoided me those 2 weeks. He didn't ask about transition plans or training materials. He didn't inquire about passwords or system access. He acted like I had already disappeared. His avoidance strategy was about to backfire spectacularly. Fine by me. If he didn't want to discuss the transition, we wouldn't discuss it. Tracy, the new accounts payable clerk, kept asking questions about procedures and deadlines. What happens after I process the vendor payments? She would ask. How do I run the monthly reports? I smiled and gave her vague answers. It's all documented somewhere, I would say. Of course, I had deleted most of that documentation months ago. My last day was Thursday, 1 day before payroll was due. The timing was absolutely perfect. A week after I left, Tracy texted me. I'm so sorry to bother you, but we can't find the payroll processing instructions. Do you know where they might be? I read the message and set my phone aside without responding. They would figure it out. Or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I was busy enjoying my freedom and preparing for my new job. 2 days later, another text from Tracy. The month-end reports are due tomorrow, and we can't access the templates. Could you help us out? Again, I didn't respond. I was busy starting my new job, where my boss actually appreciated my expertise. The contrast was stark. Professional respect versus desperate pleading. By the end of the week, I heard through the grapevine that the office was in chaos. No one could find passwords for the banking systems. The custom formulas I had built into their financial reports were password protected. The vendor contact lists were nowhere to be found. Amanda tried to help, but she had only learned the basic data entry tasks. She didn't understand the bigger picture. How all the systems connected, how the monthly cycle worked, how to troubleshoot problems when things went wrong. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. And I had built that house of cards very carefully, with strategic weak points. Tracy quit after 2 weeks. It's not worth the stress, she told someone who told someone who told me. That place is a disaster. The word was spreading through professional networks faster than Michael could contain it. They tried to hire her replacement, but word was getting around. The property management industry in our city is small. People talk. Everyone knew that Michael's company was struggling with internal organizational challenges. That's when Michael brought Amanda back full-time. She was suddenly working 40 hours a week instead of 20, trying to handle everything I used to do. The irony was beautiful. The nepotism hire was now drowning in real responsibilities. But here's the problem with nepotism. Competence and connections aren't the same thing. Amanda had an MBA, but she had never managed financial operations for a business. She knew the theory, but not the practice. I heard she was working late every night, trying to reverse engineer the systems I had built. But those systems weren't just software. They were relationships with vendors, understanding of cash flow patterns, knowledge of regulatory requirements. You can't Google institutional knowledge. You can't download experience. You can't hire someone's spouse and expect them to replicate years of specialized work. The house of cards was wobbling dangerously. Tax season arrived like a freight train. Their CPA firm requested the year-end financial statements and supporting documentation. Standard stuff that I used to prepare every January without thinking about it. But this year, no one knew how to produce those reports. Michael called the CPA personally. "Can you just estimate everything based on last year's numbers?" The CPA firm declined. They explained that they needed actual financial data, not estimates. They needed bank reconciliations, accounts receivable aging reports, fixed asset schedules, debt amortization tables. All of those reports existed in the system, but they were generated by custom formulas that I had password protected. The templates were saved in files that I had locked or deleted. Amanda spent days trying to recreate the reports manually, but she made mistakes, double counting some items, missing others entirely. The numbers didn't balance. The CPA firm rejected the first submission and requested corrections. Then they rejected the second submission and the third. By March, the company was facing penalties for late tax filing. Michael was panicking, calling around to other CPA firms begging for help. But no one wanted to take on a client with such disorganized records. The staff exodus began in earnest. First, the receptionist quit, tired of dealing with angry vendors who weren't getting paid on time. Then the property manager left for a competitor, citing lack of administrative support. Even the maintenance supervisor found another job. He told people that the company couldn't process his expense reimbursements properly anymore. He was buying supplies with his own money and waiting months to get paid back. Every exit interview mentioned the same thing. Chaos in the financial department. Lack of organization. Poor management of basic business operations. HR compiled a report of the common themes in the exit interviews. Guess whose name came up in every single one? Not as the problem, but as the solution that was missing. "Ever since the controller left, nothing works right," one person wrote. "She kept everything running smoothly. The financial systems fell apart when they didn't replace her properly," said another. "Management doesn't understand what they lost when she quit," wrote a third. That report landed on Michael's desk. I would have loved to see his face when he read it. By summer, people were telling me stories about Michael's behavior at work. Showing up late, looking stressed and disheveled, snapping at employees over minor issues, asking vendors basic questions about invoicing and payment terms. One day, he reportedly asked the office supply vendor how to reconcile a bank statement. A business owner asking a paper salesman for accounting advice. The secondhand embarrassment was overwhelming. He tried to hire me back, sending a friendly email about exploring opportunities for renewed collaboration. The subject line was, "Miss working together." I deleted it without reading past the first sentence. Amanda was working 60-hour weeks now, trying to keep up with everything. But the problems were getting worse, not better. Vendor payments were late, financial reports were inaccurate. Rent collections were falling behind because no one understood the tenant management systems. I heard he started drinking during the day. Not obviously drunk, but people could smell alcohol on his breath during afternoon meetings. The stress was eating him alive. The public fallout was starting. Disgruntled ex-employees began posting reviews on Glassdoor and Indeed. The reviews painted a picture of incompetent management and financial chaos. "Avoid this company," wrote one. "They don't know how to run their own business." "Management is in over their heads," said another. "Basic operations are constantly breaking down." Vendors started pulling contracts. The office supply company switched to cash-only terms after several late payments. The cleaning service found a more reliable client. Even the coffee delivery service canceled their account. One of their biggest property management clients called me directly. "We're thinking of switching companies," they said. Things have been disorganized lately. Would you recommend anyone? I referred them to a competitor. Within a month, they had transferred their portfolio away from Michael's company. That was a 6-figure annual contract. Gone. I checked their website out of curiosity. The Our Team page, which used to showcase their experienced staff, was practically empty. Then came the big hit, an IRS audit notice. Apparently, their tax filings had been so problematic that the government decided to take a closer look. The IRS wanted to review 3 years of financial records, bank statements, payroll reports, expense documentation, depreciation schedules, all the things that I used to organize meticulously and that were now scattered or missing. Michael tried to blame the CPA firm for the audit. The CPA firm pointed to the disorganized records they had received. We can only work with the data we're given, they explained in writing. The IRS requested access to the previous controller's documentation and filing systems. The problem? Those systems were password protected or deleted. Amanda spent weeks trying to reconstruct financial records from bank statements and scattered receipts. But 3 years of detailed documentation couldn't be recreated from scratch, especially by someone who hadn't been there when the transactions occurred. The audit process stretched on for months. Professional fees for lawyers and accountants, penalties for missing information, interest on unpaid taxes that couldn't be calculated properly. A new employee discovered something interesting while organizing old files. Amanda's consulting payments didn't match any actual work product. No reports, no deliverables, no meeting minutes. The new employee, fresh out of college and unfamiliar with office politics, filed an anonymous whistleblower report with the state labor department. She thought she was reporting potential fraud. Suddenly, Michael was dealing with 2 government investigations. The IRS audit was questioning his tax compliance. The Labor Department was investigating potential wage and hour violations related to the consulting payments. The timing couldn't have been worse. His business was already struggling with cash flow problems. Now he had to pay lawyers and accountants to deal with multiple government agencies. The board of directors, his silent partner investors, started asking uncomfortable questions. They had invested in a profitable property management company, not a target for government investigations. Emergency board meeting was called. I heard about it through the same network of former employees who had been keeping me updated on the chaos. The board meeting was brutal, according to my sources. Financial irregularities, shrinking staff, breach of fiduciary duty. Michael was summoned to explain how a profitable company had devolved into such chaos. He tried to blame me. Our former controller left without proper transition, he reportedly said. She didn't document her processes adequately. The board members weren't buying it. Didn't you approve all budget decisions? Asked one investor. Weren't you responsible for ensuring adequate documentation and backup procedures? His silence was apparently deafening. They questioned Amanda's consulting fees. Why was his wife being paid more than the previous controller for part-time work? Where were the deliverables? What specific value was being provided? Michael couldn't answer those questions without admitting that the payments were essentially nepotism disguised as consulting fees. The investor who had originally backed the company was particularly harsh. We invested in professional management, not a family employment program. By the end of the meeting, Michael's role was reduced to a figurehead position. Within 2 weeks, Michael was forced to step down as CEO. The investors seized operational control and brought in a professional management team. Amanda was immediately removed from the payroll. A forensic audit was ordered to determine the full extent of the financial problems. The new management team had to rebuild basic financial systems from scratch, essentially recreating all the work I had done over 2 years. The business was on life support. Most of the property management contracts had been lost to competitors. The remaining clients were threatening to leave unless operations improved quickly. I got a LinkedIn message from the new interim CEO. I understand you built the original financial systems here. Would you be interested in consulting with us to help restore operations? It was tempting. The hourly rate they offered was more than I had ever made in salary, but I was happy in my new job, and I had no interest in cleaning up Michael's mess. I politely declined and suggested they hire one of the Big Four accounting firms to rebuild their systems properly. I didn't need the money. I didn't need the drama. I had already won. My new job was everything Michael's company wasn't. Flexible schedule, fair compensation, and most importantly, respect. My boss valued my expertise and trusted my judgment. Novel concepts, apparently. When I told my husband about the consulting offer, he kissed my forehead and said, "You're free now. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore." He was right. I had gotten my revenge not through sabotage or spite, but through simple professionalism. I had built systems, documented everything properly, and left when I wasn't valued. Their failure was entirely self-inflicted. Sometimes I thought about Michael and wondered how he was doing, but mostly I didn't. There's something liberating about moving forward instead of looking back. My baby was due in 2 months. I was building a nursery with money I earned at a job that respected my worth. Life was good. It's been a year now since I left Michael's company. I'm thriving in my role as a senior financial analyst, working remotely with a team that values expertise over politics. My daughter is 6 months old and perfect. The financial security I fought for means I can afford quality childcare and still save for her future. Michael's refusal to pay me fairly ultimately led me to a much better situation. I heard through the grapevine that the company was eventually sold to a larger firm. Michael walked away with very little after paying legal fees and penalties. Amanda had to find a real job for the first time in years. Sometimes former coworkers reach out to thank me. "You showed us what self-respect looks like," one wrote. "I learned to value my own work by watching how you handled that situation. That means more to me than any revenge could." The best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's success, peace, and watching the people who underestimated you become victims of their own ego. It's building something better and never looking back. I kept my head high, never played dirty, and still watched him crumble under the weight of his own poor decisions.